morning, Summiteers. What a privilege to be here, and I have to say, I understand that I am the only person who can say that I have been to each of these summits as a speaker. I am just incredibly honored. I want to say thank you to Jeff Hunt for making that so, and also to his predecessor, my dear friend John Andrews, for the honor that he bestowed on me last year of the Stephen Long Award. I just can't tell you how much this summit and the fact that you're here to talk about this issue means to me, and I hope will mean to you. I'm going to go through a lot of material very quickly. The beauty of the live streaming and videotaping and so on is that you can go to the videotape if it goes too fast, but bear with me and let's see what we can do to get this done. A lot of people have made reference to this quote. It is one of my favorites. I had the privilege of serving President Reagan and fighting, in a small way, the last generation's existential threat against Soviet communism. Let's talk about what ours is. We have some confusion on this point, I think it's fair to say. The guy on the left talked about it as terrorism. The guy on the right is insisting on calling it violent extremism. I want to figure out what that means. Well, these are certainly violent extremists, aren't they? They're killing Christians here and in a lot of other places. But they're not alone. They have counterparts in this country. We're told they're lone wolves. They're not. They're individual jihadists, and we're going to have to call them that and address what they're about. They're not doing this in isolation, either the Islamic State or their outrunners here. Here are some examples, and this is hardly an exhaustive list, of other violent extremist groups. What do these guys all have in common? This is an unmentionable word. You're literally not allowed to say this in official Washington. But Sharia is the DNA of all of these Islamic supremacists. It's what they ultimately share, whether they're of the Sunni stripe or of the Shiite stripe. They are not representing all Muslims. A good friend of mine, a man I'm sure you've seen on Fox and elsewhere, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, is leading a Muslim reform movement, and he explicitly says Sharia is man-made law. This is apostasy for those who believe otherwise, who believe that it is dictated by God, including a lot of these characters and what they're trying to do in the West as well as in Muslim majority lands to impose Sharia on Muslims and non-Muslims alike. What is it? Well, it's got a patina of religiosity, to be sure. By some estimates, it's 10%, but what's the rest of it? The rest of it, ladies and gentlemen, is a brutally repressive, totalitarian, political, military, and legal program. It is meant to govern all aspects of a Muslim's life, but it is also meant to govern the entire world. If we get this right, if we understand that that's the connective tissue, that's what's animating these folks, we have a chance of doing something about it, because frankly that means it isn't a religion. Sharia is something we have laws that protect us against if we can use them rather than protect Sharia as a religion, as some, notably the Obama administration, would have us do. What else do these guys have in common? What is it that everyone who embraces Sharia, again, not all Muslims, but every Muslim who does, what else do they have in common? They have jihad. A quick primer on jihad. You, of course, all are familiar with this iconic image of one of the worst attacks in this country, in our history, in the name of jihad. That was what was going on here, as Craig mentioned earlier, as well, and in a lot of other places besides. But, ladies and gentlemen, jihad has some other manifestations. It's not just violence. If I leave you with one thought, it's that. It's not just violence. Here's an example. We're seeing a lot of it in Europe at the moment. The Obama administration is intent on trying to expand it here as well. At latest count, there's something like 300 Syrians who are being brought into this country every day as refugees. Do we know that they're Sharia adherent? No. Do we know that they're jihadists? No. They come from a country in which both of those are traditions. Could they be? Absolutely. And when the FBI director says he can't tell whether they are or whether they're not, that ought to give all of us pause. It ought to cause a pause in their immigration as well. Then there's this, zakat. Zakat is a term for obligatory contributions. There are 8 prescribed purposes for zakat, at least one. By some counts, 4 of the 8 involve supporting jihad. Think about it. Material support for jihad is what's at work here. Let me just turn to what I consider to be the single most important of the other kinds of jihad besides the violent kind. It is practiced by the Muslim Brotherhood, the image of which is here. They call it civilization jihad. It is stealthy, it is seditious, and it is considered every bit as legitimate as the violent kind of jihad, as the hijra, as the zakat. It's what you do when you're not strong enough to use violence. This little book, ladies and gentlemen, and we will have it available, or at least you can order it if you choose to, outside. You can also get it as a download for free. Think about it, for free from securefreedom.org. At that website, you will find a little bit of its story. It has in this document, which is written by a top Muslim Brotherhood official, about the civilization jihad, this mission statement. It makes absolutely clear the purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood is to destroy Western civilization from within. By our hands, meaning yours and mine, and our elected representatives, as well as by the hands of the believers. Why? So that God's religion, Allah's religion, can be made victorious over all other religions. Those are not my words. This was introduced into evidence in the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history. 4 federal judges affirmed, implicitly if not explicitly, its authenticity and used it to convict 5 fundraisers, zakat, fundraisers for the designated terrorist organization Hamas right in Dallas. What does this have to do with the situation, the existential threat we're facing? Well, this program of subversive, stealthy penetration and takedown is operating. It's in fact been at work for 50 years, ladies and gentlemen. Most in our government have no idea. In fact, I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. And I dare say most of you didn't know the extent to which this has been going on and the corrosive effect it has had on our war effort to try to protect ourselves here as well as our interests and allies abroad against these Islamic supremacists. I want to emphasize that one of the things that the Muslim Brotherhood has been about, and again, you don't have to take my word for it, it's what they say they're doing, is building infrastructure inside our country, just as they've done in Europe. You know, when you hear these violent jihadists, extremists, if you will, have blown something up, it's always the case. It's always the case that they have been associated with a radical mosque. Of course, we're told that that has no bearing on anything, and the people in the mosque say they never saw them. They don't know how this could happen. He was such a nice fellow if they knew him at all. This is known as taqiyya, ladies and gentlemen. And to the extent that those mosques are virtually, if not actually without exception, organizations that have been built in our country by the Muslim Brotherhood, often with funding from Saudi Arabia, they pose a threat, at least an incipient threat, a civilization jihadist threat. Under the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has not only gotten mosques built, but has gotten inside the wire of our government, we've had platitudes like these, served up by the guy on the left and the guy on the right. Both are wrong. It's not that Islam or all people who subscribe to Islam are involved in warfare, but under Sharia, that's what they're supposed to be engaged in. Jihad, holy war, in one fashion or another. And whether we think we're at war with them, they are, as you may have noticed, at war with us. With the penetration of our government has come something that I believe, as I indicated earlier, contributed materially to the confusion about what we're dealing with here. I want to just walk you through very quickly how this is translated into kind of what I think of as the official paradigm of the United States government. You see over there on the left this relatively small group of people that are described as people who are hijacking or perverting or otherwise misconstruing and misrepresenting the religion of peace. They, it's acknowledged by our government, are the enemy. They're violent extremists. But they have nothing to do with the program, the beliefs of the people on the right side of that line, which is the fault line of violence. And all those folks on the right side of that line are our friends, or people that we can safely work with and take counsel from, including these folks, who we're endlessly told are nonviolent and therefore are on the right side of the line and should be people who are arbiters of what we can know, what we can say, what we can do about Sharia supremacism. Well, what does that mean? That means they get to say, actually, there is a greater threat of violent extremism than even that one that might somehow be connected to their faith, namely what you represent. You conservatives and constitutionalists and Jenny Beth Martin and the Tea Party movement. And anybody have a gun? Well, you are a violent extremist, at least incipiently. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, too. Here's the right paradigm, ladies and gentlemen, and if I leave you with one thought out of all of this, I hope this is it. There is a large group of people. I don't know exactly how large relative to the other, but divided by Sharia, you have on the one side, on the left, those who absolutely think Sharia is the word of God. It is their duty to fulfill its various mandates, ruthlessly, if possible, violently, and if not, through migration or colonization, through zakat, or through civilization jihad. Now, on the other side of that fault line, and again, I don't know exactly how large relative to the first, those on the left, the violent types, the right side are. But let's just say for the purpose of discussion, it's probably millions of people around the world, maybe hundreds of millions of Muslims, who don't know anything about Sharia. Many of them are illiterate, wouldn't know what's in the Quran if they had to, their lives depended upon reciting it. But the guys whose lives are about reciting it, the guys whose lives are about implementing it are on that other side. And guess where the Muslim Brotherhood is? They're on the wrong side of the right paradigm. And so to the extent that we are taking counsel from them on anything, to the extent we're legitimating them, we're empowering them, we're emboldening them. Under the Obama administration, we've been arming them and funding them. This is madness, ladies and gentlemen. They are the enemy, not our allies. This was brought home very powerfully just this week. I don't know how many of you caught it, because, of course, the mainstream media is determined to exhibit what Senator Ted Cruz displayed in a powerful 3-hour hearing of his Judiciary Oversight Subcommittee in the Senate on Tuesday. Namely, willful blindness. This is a term that my friend and somebody I hope you know and admire as much as I, Andy McCarthy, coined for his book of the same title. What Senator Cruz displayed by taking testimony from Andy McCarthy and a former Department of Homeland Security whistleblower by the name of Phil Haney, author of a marvelous book called See Something, Say Nothing. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, I mentioned earlier, a Muslim reformer And also Chris Galbatz, a man who's an activist who's gone undercover inside some of these Muslim Brotherhood front organizations, like the Council on American Islamic Relations, and exposed their relations to the Saudis, and exposed their part in the jihad. So what Senator Cruz demonstrated unmistakably is our government has been subverted by this willful blindness, by being told and accepting what they're told from the Muslim Brotherhood. They're partners in countering violent extremism, as though that's the only problem that we have, or even the most important of those problems. A colleague of mine and I, Claire Lopez, have recently written a book on the subject, sort of a companion to Phil Haney's first-hand account, called See No Sharia, Countering Violent Extremism and the Disarming of America's First Lines of Defense. Again, you can get this outside, sign up for it, go online, get it for free at securefreedom.org. But this will make you cry, ladies and gentlemen. This documents what has happened to our country. Why 15 years on, we are still so clueless and so ill-prepared to contend with this multifaceted and growing threat here, not just someplace else. Again, the point was brought home in cross-examination by Senator Cruz of the Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, Thursday of this week, when he actually acknowledged he was willfully blind about what Phil Haney has talked about how his investigations were suppressed, investigations that he believes might have led to the prevention of the attack in San Bernardino, maybe even the attack in Orlando. How he watched as agents of Hillary Clinton in the Department of State and others in his own organization shredded the files, eliminated the records that he had painstakingly compiled of enemies of this country, some of whom are operating inside it. Not only was Jay Johnson contemptuously ignorant of this reality inside his own department, he actually suggested that he didn't care. He rather cared more about what Muslims he talked to. In fact, I think he said all the Muslims I talked to say, we mustn't say anything about Islam or jihad or Sharia. Well, they also don't want him to make a big deal out of fighting that civilization jihad, you know? They don't want to have him do things that would make it harder for them to help us, as he put it. Folks, that's the Muslim Brotherhood talking. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security has a small echo chamber which is filled with Muslim Brotherhood operatives telling him to see something, no, see nothing, and more importantly, do nothing about the threat we are facing. And you and I are at greater risk as a result. Finally, let me bring you right up to the minute. On Tuesday of next week, all other things being equal, these two gentlemen, leaders in the United States House of Representatives, have in mind actually institutionalizing the arrangements I've just criticized, helping Jay Johnson perpetuate into the next administration, perhaps, the willful blindness, the inability to understand, let alone do anything about this threat. They also, by the way, think they'll buy off the Democrats in their cavilling for gun control. And I don't know if any of this bothers any of you, but it bothers the hell out of me, I've got to tell you. And I hope you'll let these people know, don't even think about it. Finally, here's what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen. We need a policy and a program and a political agenda of what? Of victory over jihad in all of its manifestations, except no substitute. Thank you. God bless you all.